What's going on, everyone? DSP here, and it is time for another Hateful Truth game review. Today we're going to talk about one of those shameless movie tie-ins, but this one's a little bit different than your typical tie-in for a couple of reasons. And we're going to get into them, but basically this game, when it came out, a lot of people did not have very high expectations for it. Some did because of the people who actually developed it, and for certain reasons it excels, for other reasons it really falls flat on its face. So of course we're here to talk about the movie tie-in game, Transformers Dark of the Moon. And first of all, you might say, oh god, groan, another Michael Bay Transformers movie. This is going to be an awful game because the movies are fucking awful, right? Well, okay, the first Transformers movie wasn't that bad, but the last two were pretty bad. And so this is the movie tie-in for the latest release, Transformers Dark of the Moon. Now, there's some story behind this game. Basically, when the last one came out, what was it, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, or whatever the hell that atrocity was called, there were a lot of complaints. I mean, critics were panning the game, saying, why does this game exist? This game is fucking balls. Like, at this point, there's no reason to even rent these games anymore. It's really just bad. And so, what ended up happening was the Transformers license went to a different studio in the meantime, in a couple of years between the two last Michael Bay movies. And basically what ended up happening is a company called High Moon Studios worked on a Transformers game called War for Cybertron, which came out last year. Now, War for Cybertron was great. It had 3-player co-op, it had an epic long campaign. You could play as both your favorite Autobots and your favorite Decepticons for 2 completely separate campaigns. It had really elaborate and well thought out online play. I mean, it was the total package. And for most intents and purposes, the game was critically acclaimed, got really decent reviews, and it's looking now like they're going to be working on a War for Cybertron sequel. So that's great. But here's what ended up happening. When War for Cybertron was released and got so much critical acclaim, well, what happened was Activision said, oh, holy shit, we have to do something to make our movie tie-in games better because they're fucking crap right now and we know that they're crap. So they ran to High Moon Studios and said, hey, High Moon, thanks, so much for doing such a good job with War for Cybertron, and what we'd like you to do now is rush out a Dark of the Moon game to coincide with the release of the movie next year. And High Moon Studios, at first, I'm sure they're happy to get the work, but when you have less than a year to pump out a game, especially a one when you're trying to live up to the standards of another game that you already made that was really good, i.e. War for Cybertron, things can get really tough, okay? And that's exactly what it feels like when you play Transformers Dark of the Moon. When you first jump in, you're like, wow, if you played War for Cybertron, you're going to understand it's pretty similar. You've got, it's a third-person perspective, a third-person shooter, but you have the ability to transform into a vehicle on the fly at any time, both vehicle mode, which in this game for whatever reason is called stealth mode, and your regular robot forms have completely different weapon sets. One form actually is more of a defensive mode with more armor. The other form is more of an offensive mode. And every single robot that you play has unique weapons, unique abilities. So there's really a lot to this game. And you're like, wow, this does feel like War for Cybertron. At least in that respect. And in that respect, it's actually a very good thing because War for Cybertron was such a good game. But then as you start to play further into the campaign, you kind of realize, okay, you can tell the game is rushed because there's moments of greatness in this game. For example, there is a flying stage where you play a Starscream, and you fly into a base, you kill a couple Autobots, there's an aerial chase, and then all of a sudden the stage ends, and you've only been playing it for like 20 minutes, and you're like, man, that was a really fucking fun stage. I wish there was more like that in the game. And guess what? There are none. There's only about, I think, 8 separate stages in the whole game. The whole game's campaign is roughly around 4 hours. So you can beat this game pretty much in one sitting. Even for a weekend rental, that's pretty pathetic. And the game is meant to be a prequel to the movie, and so I think what really happened was they were given a plot and said, listen, you have to somehow fit in this game with this plot. And what I think High Moon Studios did was they said, alright, let's just copy and paste the gameplay from War for Cybertron, because everyone really enjoyed that gameplay, but now we have to make it fit this form of a story that we've been given by Activision. And it really shows that if they had more creative control, the game probably could have been a lot better. For example, there's a couple parts where you play as Laserbeak. For the very first time in a Transformers game, you get to play as Laserbeak, and you're doing stealth kind of gameplay. You're very weak, but you're flying around, you're trying to dodge different enemies and things like that, and do certain things. And it's very fun while it lasts, but then all of a sudden it gets a little tedious, and then it ends. And it's just like, there needed to be more meat to the campaign of this game. You can tell this game is not made for someone who really wants to spend $60 on the game. This is meant for a teenager who's going to go see the movie, and they want to kind of have some more experiences with the Transformers, and so they go run out and either their mother buys the game, or they go rent it for the weekend. That's really the purpose of this game. It's not meant to be a purchase. It really isn't. Now, in addition to the very, very short but okay campaign, you've got multiplayer. And once again, just like War for Cybertron, the multiplayer is decent. In fact, it plays similarly to War for Cybertron. Unfortunately, you do have less maps and less things going on, less game modes. There are 4 classes that you can play as. Just like in War for Cybertron, there were different classes, and each class has their own unique abilities, their own unique style. Some are like tanks with heavy defense, and they just try to do a lot of damage, but they're very slow. Then you've got the guys who can fly, so they're very fast. If you're doing like a capture the flag mode, they're really good because they can fly across the entire stage to capture a point and then fly away and just keep doing strategic strikes like that, but they're a little bit more on the weaker side. So there is some variety to the gameplay. Again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but it really does feel like you're playing War for Cybertron all over again. The problem with this is that once again, you can tell they were rushed. It's like a copy and paste from War for Cybertron. There's really nothing new here. Like I said, it doesn't actually have as much as War for Cybertron did in terms of multiplayer variety. And in addition to that, there's only 4 classes, and each class levels up over time and unlocks new abilities, new guns, and such and such. And so you can customize your loadouts. The problem is, I played the multiplayer of Dark of the Moon for about 3 hours, maybe a little bit under that. Just playing it for 3 hours, I had almost maxed out all 4 classes, because there's only 20 levels that you can level them up, and sometimes you'll gain 2 to 3 levels a match if you do really well in that match. So I could only say maybe 4 or maybe 5 hours max of playing this online, and then there's no reason to ever play it again because you've gotten all the online achievements and you've leveled up every character. So there's really no incentive to keep playing. There's no hook. There's no really replayability after about 5 hours. So you figure a 4-hour campaign paired with a 5-hour multiplayer experience, this game is not worth $60 for 9 hours of gameplay. If anything, fuck this and go get War for Cybertron if you haven't played it yet. That game is much more bang for your buck. Right now, it's obviously in the bargain bin because it's an older game, and it's a really good way to prepare for War for Cybertron 2, which is currently in development. This game does not hold a candle to the original War for Cybertron, which had really long, epic stages, multiple experiences with each character, and aerial combat, ground combat. This is like War for Cybertron light, and so it really isn't. It's sad because you know that the people at High Moon Studios probably really did as well as they could with the time frame that they had. They had less than a year to complete this game, so they probably rushed as much as they could. Again, it's really hard when you have a graphics engine and things that you need to load in here with all these new characters and things, and try to mesh in your game with the storyline that you're given from Activision. So I'm sure these guys had a tough time, and it wasn't easy to get this game out. So I honestly can't even fault the game developers for this game not being that good. I have to say it was really just a rush movie effort, and if anyone, Activision is to blame for only giving this studio a year to develop the game and demanding that this game come out at the same time as the movie. It really shows that if they had more time, this game probably could have been a lot better. So, Transformers Dark of the Moon, again, a very pale, in comparison, clone to War for Cybertron. Makes you want to play War for Cybertron when you're playing it, because if anything, you wish, man, I wish I was playing the better game right now. The campaign is only okay. The multiplayer is good, but way too short. So, I gotta be honest, this game is only, I would say only, slightly above average. Meaning, an average movie tie-in game, there's really nothing at all good about it. The only reason this game is better than the previous Transformers movie tie-in games is because it was made by High Moon Studios, and they copy and pasted the formula from War for Cybertron, which was a far superior game. So I'm going to say that Transformers Dark of the Moon is a 5, okay? It is pretty average. It's better than, I'd say, the average movie tie-in game, but at the same time, there's not a lot of meat here. There's not a lot going on. It's definitely not a game you're going to want to spend $60 on. It's more of a weekend rental if you're really a big fan of Transformers or the movie Dark of the Moon, but if not, there's really no reason to play this game, and I would say just hold out and wait for War for Cybertron 2, which should be coming in the next year or two from High Moon Studios. So, alright, so that's it for this episode of The Hateful Truth. I hope that you found it informative, and I'll see you guys next time.